Alright, econ students, last video we took a look at were the different economic systems that exist out there. And despite the economic system we're looking at, we want to see how goods move within an economy and how money moves within an economy. So we're going to highlight this with a pretty simple model called the circular flow model. And so this you can imagine yourself within this circular flow because you participate in this circular flow all the time. And so if we say, okay, this is you right here, and you have decided that you want some good, right? So you've got this idea that you want a good, and you want to go buy that good, right? Well, how do you go about buying a good? Right? You go to the store and you buy it. Well, how did you get the money in order to buy it? All this is wrapped up in the circular flow concept. Right? So let's say first you say, oh, I want to buy a good. Well, I got to go to work in order to buy any sort of other goods. Right? So you're gonna exchange something in a market that we call the factor market, or we could call it kind of a labor market. And so where do you work at you work someplace, right? You work at I don't know, let's say you work at a factory or something. This isn't a factory, it's just a little kind of house looking thing, but let's call this a business or a firm. All right, so this is a firm or a business. This is you want to buy stuff. What does a firm want to do? They want to produce stuff, right? You want to buy, they want to produce. You can see a benefit by exchanging with each other, right? They want to produce, you want to buy stuff. Well, you need to exchange something with them so they can give you money to go and buy stuff, right? So this is just going to represent any generic firm, and this is going to represent any generic person and the interest that they have. Right? So when you decide that, hey, I want to buy something, I'm going to go to work, you're taking your labor and you are exchanging it for something. You don't just go and work for free. You want to be compensated for that. Right? So this firm is going to pay you money in order to work. We can call it wages. Right, we'll put a dollar sign here representing money. Right, so you've made an exchange in what we call the factor market. This is down here is the factor market. Anytime you go to work, right? So we can highlight this one or write this one right here. So anytime you're going to work like that, you get something in return like that, right? So that represents an exchange that's taking place in the factor market. Right? But what now you got money. Now what are you going to do? Right? You went to work, you exchange your labor for wages. What are you going to do? Well, now what you're going to do is you're going to take that money and you're going to bring that money. You're going to end up going to a business. Now, again, this represents any generic firm over here. You're going to go to a different firm, but it'll be represented by firms. And you're going to take that money, right? So this is your money that you got in wages. And you want to spend that money. You want to spend that money on a good that you want. So you go and find a firm and you say, hey firm, give me some goods. I'll give you some money. So that firm says, okay, we had some people working, they produced some stuff. So we're going to take some of those goods and we're going to give it to people. Right? So this could be goods right there. And you make an exchange. And this exchange takes place in what we call up here is, let me find a good spot for it. This is going to be the product market, right? And so you've got this money from working, right? So we'll highlight that one in green. You got that money that you got working, and now you take that to a firm, and you give it to the firm. Any firm, a firm that you want to buy something from, and that firm gives you goods in return. So you see this circular flow. Right? We've got labor moving this way to firms, and then firms deciding to produce goods and give those goods to people. And then you've got this monetary line going the other way, right? So this monetary line is firms are paying people wages, and then people are taking those wages and they're spending that, so firms get more money to give on wages, and people spend those wages, and people get wages and spend wages, and then people get goods and give their labor, and sorry about that, I moved it out of the way, right? People get goods and give their labor and get goods and give their labor. So you see this circular flow process going on. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to show the circular flow but we are going to include somebody right in the middle, because this right here, this circular flow, just has two players, right? So our two players are right here. We've got people on one side and we've got firms on the other side. But if you stop for a second and you think about it, you should be able to think of another player that typically involves itself within this little parameter. So this circular flow would be a purely free market one. Why is it purely free market? Well, it's purely free market because you just have individuals, and you just have individuals made up in firms, right? You don't have any sort of government. So what we're going to do is we're going to throw the government right in the middle here and see how the government involves itself in this process, right? So how does a government function, right? How does a government function? Well, there are people out there that say, hey, I want to work for the government. So this line that we had going from people to businesses, that still exists. But there's also some people that say, hey, instead of going to work for a private firm, I am going to go and work for the government. And so this is labor right here. It's some labor goes to firms and some labor goes to the government, right? Okay. Well, and there's also the firms, sometimes they pay wages out to people, but also sometimes they pay wages, or you could say it in the form of like taxes, to the government, right? So this would be taxes. So this is still a green line because it's money, and this is still a red line because it is labor, right? All right, now let's focus on the top part here. So what do we got? Up here in the product market, sometimes firms produce goods and give them to people. Does the government need goods? What kind of goods does the government need? Well, the government needs any goods that people need. The government needs computers, and the government needs cars, and the government needs, all sorts of things to function, right? It needs buildings, right? So firms end up providing goods for the government. So this will be goods as well. Right, so it's not complex. This line coming from firms to people is goods, but that line is also goods that go to the government. And you could probably guess what this last one is. Sometimes people spend money on businesses. Other times people spend money that goes to the government in the form of taxes. Right? So the government gets all this stuff. People work for the government. Goods go to the government. Taxes goes to the government. What does the government do? Well, sometimes many times it has its own expenditures. It spends money on people. I'm just going to put spends here on people, and sometimes it spends money for firms. All right? So the government gets all that stuff, and then it does stuff with that. It spends. It has its own expenditures on people and on firms. All right. So although this may look complex, it is actually pretty simple. In the factor market, without the government, where we started at the beginning, it's just the exchange of labor and wages, right? People work for businesses, businesses pay people. If we go up here to the product market, people take that money, they spend it on goods, they get goods, businesses get money. Then we threw the government in here, and sometimes people work. Here I'll highlight as we go a little bit. Maybe I won't. There we are. Sometimes people, right here is people work for the government. Sometimes people pay, or businesses pay taxes to the government. Sometimes businesses have goods go to people. Sometimes businesses have goods go to the government. Right? Sometimes people spend money on goods. Sometimes those goods, or sometimes that money goes to the government in the form of taxes. And then the government has its own expenditures out here. All right? So that is called the circular flow. It is how money and goods and labor move within an economy.